Hi, welcome to another Onwards and Upwards education video. This one is Year 8 History 1.2, and this is the second video in the unit all about the Black Death in Europe, Asia and Africa. The topic of this video is the outbreak of the Black Death. According to historical records, the first case of the Black Death was contracted in the province of Hubei in China in 1334. From this time on, the plague began to spread through the population of Asia. And we've got a map here that shows us the province of Hubei, and then also inset down the bottom, we can see the province of Hubei in the grand scheme of China. So it was a mysterious illness. At the time when the Black Death was wreaking havoc on the known world, nobody really knew what was causing it or how it was spreading. Thanks to years of analysis of historical sources, we now know that it was a highly contagious bacteria being spread in a number of ways. So if you have a look at this graph here, it shows you just what a devastating effect the Black Death had on the population of Europe. It was so bad that it took them hundreds of years afterwards to rebuild their population to the same number. So let's have a look at some of the biological particulars of the disease. So the particular kind of disease that we're talking about here is actually a combination of three kinds of plague. There was the Bubonic Plague, the Pneumonic Plague, and the Septicaemic Plague, and they were sort of all rolled into one. The Bubonic Plague was an illness that caused swelling of the lymph nodes, and that swelling would appear on the surface of the skin as pus-filled blotches. In actual fact, although this sounds pretty disgusting, it was the least fatal of the three kinds of plague, and it was possible for people to recover from this one. So if you have a look at this graphic here, it shows you the parts of the body that the Bubonic Plague attacked and some of the symptoms that were common to people suffering from the Bubonic Plague. So the bacteria responsible for the Bubonic Plague was endemic, and that means native, to certain parts of the world, including the Gobi Desert. Now the Gobi Desert covers a large area in the north of China and in the south of Mongolia. And this bacteria is usually dormant, which means inactive, but every so often it used to activate and cause trouble. There had previously been a major outbreak of Bubonic Plague in the 6th and 7th century, and that one had been pretty devastating too. If you have a look at this map, it just shows you where the Gobi Desert is located, and you can see it's there in the north of China, and there's also part of it in the south of Mongolia. And the red arrows show you how the bacteria might have travelled to eventually get to the place where they believe the disease broke out originally. Alright, so the second kind of illness involved in the Black Death was Pneumonic Plague. It was unfortunately always fatal because it went straight to the lungs and stopped a person from being able to breathe properly. This illness could be spread from one person to the other just by coughing. In this graphic here, you can see the part of the body that the Pneumonic Plague attacked, which was the lungs, and then there's some of the common symptoms listed there as well. And the third form of disease that we're talking about here is the Septicaemic Plague, and it attacked the bloodstream. It was a very aggressive illness, and victims usually died within hours of becoming sick because the bacteria would multiply in their body very quickly. Bleeding would seep into the skin and cause a person's extremities, so their fingers and toes, to become blackened. And so there we have the part of the body that the Septicaemic Plague typically attacked and some of the symptoms that a person might suffer. So how did it spread? The forms of bacteria that were responsible for all three kinds of plague could be transmitted by fleas that were travelling from place to place on black rats and infecting people by biting them. So these fleas and the rats that they travelled on were typically found on trading carts that obviously did a lot of travelling from place to place. In addition to this, once some people had the plague, it was spread to others by coughing, saliva and blood. So generally just being in close contact with an infected person was definitely bad news. Alright, so that is the end of our look at the original outbreak of the Black Death and some of the details around, the biological particulars of it. Now we have just a list here of some key terms in case you wanted to revise those. So hopefully now you have a good idea of where and when the first case of the Black Death was recorded, and a little bit about the signs and symptoms of the various kinds of plague that were involved. If you're ready to hear about medical science in the High Middle Ages and how the Black Death was treated, then you should check out the next video, which is 8 History 1.3.